Can we get personal for 2.2 seconds? All right, cool. Hey, babies. This is for my people who have father wounds, my people who were rejected or abandoned by their fathers. And no, I did not feel like I was abandoned. I was actually abandoned by my father because he didn't tell me that he was going to marry the woman that he married. And if you read my Safe to Love book, you know exactly the trauma that I endured with his wife. And he did not tell me that he was moving to Mississippi from Texas. Him and my mom separated when I was like 2 because he had an affair. It just was a spiral after that. I think I was too young at that point, but because of the inconsistencies over the years, I didn't have that anchor. I didn't have that provision. I didn't have that protection. I didn't have that person to validate me or even help me understand my value. I didn't have that male figure to affirm me. He moved to Mississippi, had a whole different family, raised his stepchildren, raised his grandchildren over there, gave them home and cars and all that. Yada, 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 yada. I didn't have that. That made me feel deeply rejected because I got to see the love that he poured into other people that he did not pour into me. The only time that he actually showed up is when I was graduating, or maybe I had a vocal performance or something like that. So of course my identity was more performance based because I got the attention from my earthly father when I was actually performing and doing well in my academics or extracurricular activity or the hobbies that I had and stuff like that. Layer this on top of the sexual trauma that I had from a cousin of mine and his friend. That was the only time that I really received attention from boys. If you've ever been a person who has sexual trauma, then you'll understand what I'm talking about. I won't go too deep into that, of course. So now we have layered trauma: rejection, abandonment, and then the attention that I received was only sexual attention. As a teenage girl, I started being curious. Like, okay, so I started watching BET Uncut, all of that stuff. I started watching little flicks and stuff that my uncle would have still in his VCR. I'm sorry, Mom, if you heard this, that you probably never knew. But I started to watch that because I would pay attention to the attention that the women on there would get. My identity was in shambles. I struggled with identity so bad because I wanted attention and an anchor. I was like, all right, so I learned how to talk like the women that I would see on the videos and on the interviews and all that stuff and on the flicks and stuff. I learned how to talk. It did not mean that I engaged in those things, but I learned how to talk well about those things. That spirit was working over me, baby. And I ended up attracting guys who only really cared more about that stuff. That's really what the majority of our relationship was like, was me performing in some capacity, pouring into them because I felt like I wanted those things. And so I would end up projecting that onto other people and staying in situations, reinforcing the beliefs that I already had. Then, of course, I would talk very vulgar. I would talk about sexual things a lot and talk about certain kinks and stuff. A lot of those things that I didn't even have. And that's the gist of that. And so y'all know I grew up Kojic, and Kojic is kind of strict. When you were younger, it was a little strict. And so I learned that God was an authority figure. I learned that God was like a principal and a judge, and that's who he was, until I met my mentor who told me, you're operating in a victim mentality. When I told him all of my life, that was one of those moments that just broke me. I did an activity one day where I wrote out who my father would have been if my earthly father was a father that I needed and wanted, who he would have been. Every characteristic and quality was that of God. He was perfect on paper. He was perfect on paper. That by far was my biggest breakthrough. God was doing a number. He was doing a supernatural transformation that I could not put into words. When I finally accepted God as my father, that's the reason why a lot of people always hear me say Abba Father. When I truly accepted God as my father and not just an authority figure, someone who I draw near to, when I truly started seeking God's heart and accepted God as my father, my anchor, that was the most healing, freeing experience. I realized that I am a child of God. I don't feel like an orphan anymore. I feel like an orphan. I am known. I am loved. I am protected. To know that God knows me. He has always protected me. He has always provided for me. He has always looked out for me. And if I made a mistake and went by my own will, God will whoop, 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 bring it back. Like, so I'm saying this because if you are a person who has abandonment wounds or rejection wounds, especially paternal, when you truly see and accept God as your father and have that relationship with God,